This is CHSR 97.9 FM here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. This is Python's Parodies, your film and music show, and this is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena. And folks, I have the wonderfully talented Jim Wynorski on the phone with me.
I thought you were going to say the lovely and talented.
No, I reserved that for Kelly Maroney.
All right, okay.
I take it you must have heard some of my other interviews because I've used that introduction a few times. But nonetheless, of course, you were the director of Chopping Mall and many other, I should say, independent films. I guess you came up in the Roger Corman ranks, you know, and like I said, I just had Dick Miller on, who you worked with on Chopping Mall in a brief scene, and of course, you both came up to the Corman ranks, and I was just wondering, you know, what was your best experience working with Corman? Because you've done a lot of films with him.
Oh my God. I think each film had its own moments. Chopping Mall was produced by his wife, Julie Corman,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't really get involved until the film was in editorial. And it was Julie who oversaw the project, and Roger got involved on a intermediate level when we designed the robots, because he wanted to make sure the robots looked good, and as did I. And so that's why we brought along Robert Short to create them, who had done a lot of other special effect work up to that moment. So, yeah, Roger Corman got involved after the film was edited, and he threw a lot of his ideas at it, and most of them I thought worked well. He cut a little bit of it, cut a little too tight, I thought, but in retrospect, I look back now and I say, those cuts were probably valid.
You ever going to release an uncut version?
No, because the negative's long lost.
That's unfortunate. A lot of it, like John Carl Beechler has mentioned this about Friday the 13th, Part 7. He said he had so many gore effects, that he can't restore them, and studios just threw them away. And we are lucky to get versions like the Blues Brothers and Stripes, the comedies that have been released extended and uncut.
But well, let me point out so people don't say, "Oh my God, what did I miss?" You didn't miss much.
Okay.
There was a little talk that we took out.
Okay.
No gore effects were removed. Roger had a big thing about highs and lows, valleys and peaks, and apparently my valley was too big, so he took a little bit of the valley out, and that was it. There was more talk in the malt shop that they hide out.
Okay.
But other than that, it's pretty much the way it was.
Well, I know you got a head exploding scene in it, and I was wondering if that was done similar to the way it was done in Scanners.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
First of all, I wasn't on the Scanner set, so I don't know how that was done. But mine was very simple, and
okay.
it was accomplished more in editorial than it was in concept of makeup and that sort of thing. I had a girl who gets her head explosion, and she was wearing some sort of Hawaiian shirt, and I had her to stand there and scream. I yelled, "Cut!" I got rid of. I didn't move the camera, but I moved in a mannequin with a head that was primed to explode. It wasn't even a head; it was just a burlap bag that had a lot of guts in it. And one thing I had learned from cutting trailers is that you can cut to the explosion on the explosion. And so that's what I did. I took the girl out, and I put the other girl in. I made sure everything was perfect at the moment, and I hit the explosion and exploded, and I went for the first frame of the explosion. And I then hid any you know, jump with the flash of the laser light from the robot. So when I finally came out, I said, "Wow, that looks great." So I learned a little bit from doing that.
How hard was it to get the robots to work? Was it simple or was it a difficult process?
Well, there was three robots. One that didn't move at all, and one that moved with wires. A control. It was hitched up to a control panel, and there was one that worked freely without wires. That was also hitched up to a radio controlled panel. And for the most part, they did what they were supposed to do on the first or second take. There's a couple of versions where not versions, scenes where they pull up and they back up into an alleyway or something like that. Sometimes that took 3 and 4 times to get it right. But most of the time, it worked well. And that's because Bob Short had done a spectacular job putting them all together. And that they had interchangeable numbers, and it was pretty easy to, I don't think you ever see the three of them move at the same time. You see two. And that's why I had to kind of design it so that there was always like one or two robots moving. But I couldn't show three because three was a shell. That was the one that exploded at the very end of the movie.
Yeah, and of course, having the setting be a shopping mall, of course, it allows, especially for teenagers, it allows a lot of innovation in terms of where they can go. Because after all, there's all kinds of places you can hide, or all kinds of resources for weapons in a shopping mall. When did that? Yeah.
I don't like when people just sit around and die.
Mm-hmm.
If they're going to die, I want them to die heroically or, fighting back. And I think that's why a lot of people like Chopping Mall, because these kids just don't sit there and take it. They figure out how to fight back. Yes. And I think that's, when they first get the guns out of the sporting goods shop, it's like, okay, this is exactly what I would do. And people, kind of, I think admire that because, these aren't kids that are going to let the robots just kill them. They're going to fight back.
Well, you strike me as a very hands-on director because I was looking at your Wikipedia to get a little bit of your background, and I noticed that it said that you had flunked out of film school, and it kind of reminds me of this, It's kind of like, I'll backtrack here. When I like to write, and when I was younger, I loved to write, but I never passed writing classes in school because I was always under pressure for deadline, and I'd always get a bad grade. Whereas if I did it on my own and just did it to my own resources and devices, I would do better at it. And I was wondering with you whether that was a thing, whether you just wanted to just do your own thing and learn it on your own and as you go.
The first thing I ever wrote was when I was in grammar school.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to write a script for Land of the Giants.
Okay. I've interviewed Stefan Erngrim from that.
And I wrote I had no experience writing scripts, and I lived in New York, and I didn't know Irwin Allen or any of the people from Lost in, not Lost in Space, but Land of the Giants. And I knew all those shows because I watched them. And I said, I'm going to write a script for Land of the Giants. And I wrote something, and I typed it up. Oh, God, I must have been 12 years old. And I sent it in, and I got a rejection.
Okay.
But that meant somebody read it.
Okay.
So I took that as, okay, my first time. And then I started writing articles for magazines.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one out, I sold. I must have been 14.
Oh, wow.
And they didn't know how old I was. And I was writing for these crappy, the the Tatler magazines that were all published in New York. They don't have them anymore. Now they've been replaced by People and other things like that. But back then they had these thing called TV Star Parade, and it was all about gossip. And I figured out what they wanted. I started writing them, and they bought them. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot, but, I was getting $150 a story, and they were only like 7-page stories. And back in the day, $150 bought a lot of comic books.
Yep.
So I wrote for them throughout high school and college. And then when I graduated college, I went to work for one of them. And I hated my boss, and I hated writing underneath someone. So I quit. I went to work for Doubleday's Science Fiction Book Club.
Mm-hmm.
And then that led to a gig where I was going to work on the Star Wars novelization before the Star Wars came out. And they sent me to Hollywood, and as soon as I got to Hollywood, I said, oh, my God, this place is loaded with hot chicks and opportunities. So I packed it all in. I went to Hollywood, came to Hollywood. I'm still here.
Well, your first film you directed was The Lost Empire. Now,
yeah.
What was it like doing that first film and the process to where you are now? Like, I know that's a pretty heavy question, but
come on, Greg. I'll tell you. I'll make it simple.
Yeah.
I thought it was the first and maybe last time I would direct anything.
Mm.
So I said, okay, I'm going to put everything I love in this picture. I'm going to put in hot chicks. I'm going to put in crazy sci-fi. I'm going to put in martial arts. I'm going to put in a gorilla. I'm going to put in a tribute to spaghetti westerns. I'm going to put in a women in prison section. So I put everything I liked about exploitation movies into one picture, and it worked. And it got me Chopping Mall, and then it got me in everything else I've gotten. So yes, I had fun making that film.
Yeah, it's always nice when something pays off.
I was dating Raven Delacroix at the time.
Okay.
And she and I kind of put that whole thing together.
Okay. Well, so far, you're my fifth person I've interviewed from Chopping Mall. I've had Dick Miller on. I've had Russell Todd on. I've had Steve Mitchell's been on here a couple months ago. And, of course, Kelly Maroney. I love Kelly. And loved her in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And I've watched her through the years. And she has done a lot of movies for you. Talk about working with Kelly.
Well, I think just a couple of months before I did Chopping Mall, I saw Night of the Comet at the Avco Embassy Theater in Westwood. I said, oh, it's another sci-fi movie. I'll go see it. And I saw Kelly kind of steal the whole show.
Yeah.
And I said, I want that girl for Chopping Mall. And and then I had seen Reanimator, and that's how I went for Barbara Crampton.
Mm-hmm.
And I originally wanted Deborah Blay to play the brunette, but she crapped out at the last minute for some reason I don't seem to remember at this point. So I went with Carrie Emerson. And Susie Slater was a girl I had met in a bar who was an actress who had been in Savage Streets.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I need that blonde bimbo. So we hired Susie Slater. And that's how all the four girls from Chopping Mall came about. And it was great working with Kelly. She was smart. She was articulate, and very cute. And, I put her through her paces. And it was a lot of fun.
I think Kelly's very funny. I find her very funny.
She's sarcastic, which is good. She's got an East Coast sarcastic mentality.
Yeah.
And it comes across on film.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've had her, must be 6 or 7 films. I counted them earlier, but I lost count of them. But But you had
Well,
her.
there's Transylvania Twist. There's
Yeah.
Big Bad Mama 2. She voiced the character in Deathstalker 2. She's in Not of This Earth. She's in Gila, and the one we can't talk about.
Yeah, we won't talk about that out of respect for her, sure. But yeah, Transylvania Twist had an interesting little premise to it, very unique. And of
What's
course,
that? I didn't hear what you said.
I said Transylvania Twist has a unique premise to it, so that's very innovative.
Yeah, it's a horror parody,
Mm-hmm.
and I enjoyed making it because I got to do a lot of different styles of filmmaking, and I got to parody Hammer and Universal and almost everything in between.
I noticed you've done a lot of sequel-based movies as well, like Deathstalker 2, Big Mama 2, Sorority House Massacre 2, and 976 Evil 2. Um,
All right.
I I'm assuming you enjoyed the originals and wanted to.
I always, here's the thing:
Okay.
uh, if it was a movie that I didn't particularly like, I
Mm-hmm.
never, when I made a sequel, I kind of disregarded the first one.
Okay.
If I liked the original, I tried to do, do something a little different,
Mm-hmm.
and try to complement the original. In the case of Deathstalker 2, uh, the original was such a boring little sword and sorcery epic. But I said, I'm not going to do this again. Okay, so I decided to make it happen one night in a in a Conan era,
Mm-hmm.
and it turned out to be a lot of fun. And my Deathstalker has nothing to do with the first one. Big Bad Mama 2. I always admired the first picture that Steve Carver had directed, and so I went and said, okay, I'm gonna make one that's carries on that story. And Return of Swamp Thing, I changed the costume and
You got Heather
um,
Locklear.
got Heather Locklear involved, and um, that turned out pretty well too.
Yeah. What were your memories of Angie Dickinson, and I guess like Julie McCullough as well? Of course, went on to do Growing Pains.
Well, Angie, I was in awe of Angie because one of the first movies I ever saw as a kid was Rio Bravo,
Mm-hmm.
which he was the star of. My father took me to a theater. I must have been, I don't know, 6, just because he wanted to see the film himself. And I sat there and kind of enjoyed it. And I thought, oh, that girl's really pretty. And then, of course, in later years, I saw Big Bad Mama 1 in the 70s when I lived in New York. It played in, I think it opened in 1974. I went to see it at a theater, and I really enjoyed it. So when the chance came later on to do another, part 2, I jumped at the chance. I went up, I talked to Angie. She was such a doll. She was a doll to everybody on that set. And it was a great working experience. Robert Culp was a prick, but
Okay.
Angie was a doll, and I loved working with her. She was such a sweetheart,
Mm-hmm.
and and as far as Julie McCullough goes, she was the original person I had in mind for the Julie role was Kelly Maroney, but and it was up against Julie and her for a while, but I think in the end Roger Corman decided, let's go with Julie and put Kelly at the end, which is what we did. It was kind of a little blow to Kelly because I think she wanted to play that part, but Julie had a kind of a very extreme innocence about her, and I think it was the right thing to do.
Danielle
Brisbois.
Oh, that's how you. Yeah, a lot of people liked her in the movie too, and so did I. She had a real
No,
flair.
she was a doll.
Yeah.
She was a doll, and she was. I think she was only 17 when she made that picture. and she was emancipated, so I didn't have to have a studio teacher around. And she was very sexy, as was Julie.
Mm-hmm.
So, I always come in like dressed them for their roles. Danielle did not want to continue acting. She loved music a lot, so I think after that show she may have done another movie, but she segued into music and has been very successful in that field.
Yes, and of course we've mentioned, of course, on our previous phone chat to get this interview, Against the Law. I've interviewed Nick Mancuso, and I love Nancy Allen, of course, and talk about that picture.
That picture, okay, yeah, I had a good time on that show. It was kind of a push pull because the producers wanted a contemporary action film, and I wanted to make a western, and I think it worked out good at the end. I loved working with Nancy Allen. It was the first time I worked with her, and we became good friends, and it was fun, chatting with her about some of her glorious past, like Carrie and Blowout, and
Dress to Kill. I love Dress to Kill.
And she was a hot number, still is.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved her in Dress to Kill, so big fan of her work, especially in De Palma's films. Here's something here I need to ask, because you've done the exploitation movies, and you did the sex parodies, but you also did some family films. Now, what made you branch into doing family films? Because that's quite a jump.
Branch into them, the first one I did was back in the early '90s. I did a thing called Munchie.
Yeah, but that came quite later and compared to a lot of the earlier stuff. Like, you were into some pretty hard hitting exploitation horror films.
Munchie was, I was asked to do Munchie.
Mm-hmm.
Roger said, would you do a sequel to Munchie? He said, yes. And I said, I would. But I don't want to make the creature these little gremlins creatures, because I thought that had all been done already.
Mm-hmm.
And so my Munchie was sort of like based on the frog in the Warner Brothers cartoon One Froggy Evening.
Okay.
At the very beginning of the movie, somebody's trying to throw him away, and the kid finds him, and he's just a fun-loving doll that sings, dances, and tries to help out. Sometimes does it in a kind of odd and circuitous way. And it was a great chance to work with, beautiful Lonnie Anderson,
mm-hmm.
and Monique Gabrielle, and Tony Naples.
Jennifer Love Hewitt very early.
What's that?
Jennifer Love Hewitt very early.
It's her first movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she came a long way.
She came in, and I said, "Oh, this girl's perfect." And she was so good in Munchie that I wrote a film for her called Home for Christmas, which also became another title. I can't remember the title, but it was called Home for Christmas. I know it as Home for Christmas, and that sold to USA. And so, at the end of the day, it was nice to meet up with her and do 2 movies with her.
Yes. Well, I got to admit, I I like the sex parodies, like the Bear Winch Project, and
Greg, that was shot in 2 days, with using just my money. Nobody thought I should do it, and I said, "Well, I can shoot it in 2 days for about $10,000." After I paid all the girls, and I paid off the cameraman and the motels and the food and the editing, it came to about $10,000, which was nothing. And then Showtime bought it for $90,000.
Okay.
And everybody said, "Wow, you made $80,000 for 2 days' work." And I said, yes, I did. And so that's why we made 5 of them. Because they were all very, profitable.
Yes. Well, I always find it amusing to see like these adult video stores. You get like Foreskin Gump and all these movie sex parodies. And I wrote some of the titles of yours. Some of them I felt that were very very fun, like Hills Have Thighs and
Classic. Classic.
House on Hooterville.
These things, I wish they had the one that it's still not released and probably will never be released. I did a thing called Paranocker's Activity.
Okay, yeah.
And because Cinemax got sued by one of these companies, they said no more parodies. So I never did another parody after. I did another parody, but they did not buy Paranocker's Activity, and it still sits in the vault.
Wonder why they sued over that. Like, I mean, there's so many
they didn't
done.
Sue over, no, they sued over Hills Have Thighs.
Oh.
And Cinemax had to pay some money to this guy who was a jerk.
Obviously, yeah. I mean, Cleavage Field, that's got to be better than Cloverfield.
Oh, that was a fun one to do, too. I shot that downtown L.A. in the middle of the night.
I just remember when I saw Cloverfield, I had to leave the theater because that camera was so shaky. I was getting sick, And it's like,
I didn't do that.
Yeah.
I didn't do that.
Like I said, I bet yours is better. I haven't seen Cleavage Field, but I know it's got to be better than Cloverfield. And
didn't do that one.
The Devil Wears Nada, the Da Vinci Co-ed. I love the title. Did you come up with those?
Yeah.
I love that. And, of course, Busty Co-eds versus Lusty Cheerleaders.
Busty Co-ed, yes, a classic. I had to do a versus title.
And then Lusty Busty Babocue. I love that.
So many classics, Greg.
Oh man, you have. I hope I'm not straying into a personal area here, but I've seen you do conventions and panels. So you have a thing for big-breasted women, huh?
No, really? I think every red-blooded male does.
Well, what
including you.
Yeah. But I gotta say, when you do approach women to do these movies, like are you nervous about, like, I'd be nervous about doing these films, but yeah, like what's your approach for it? Obviously you've got more
gotta be out of your mind, be nervous. No, you ask them. Usually these girls are not being asked to do nudity for the first time, if you know what I'm saying. Okay. And I think you do.
Yep. Well, I got to ask too. You mentioned, of course, somebody was Robert Kelp was a prick. I want to ask about all the women. Let's talk about the women for a minute. What are some of the women you loved working with that well, you mentioned, for instance, you were in awe of Angie Dickinson.
Yeah.
Yes. Talk about some of the women that you brought in that you were in awe of, but you were attracted to, that was also a real great working experience. Talk about these women.
Well, I would say 90% of them. There's a couple of bitches, Tanya Roberts and Jennifer Rubin come to mind, who I hated working with, and vice versa. But I would say the majority of them are women I chose to work with and who did amazing work.
Well, you worked a lot with Julie Strain.
I did a few movies with Julie Strain, yeah. Mm-hmm. She's great.
Elena, I had her name down here.
I don't know any Elena.
Oh, Erica Elena.
Erica Elenia.
Elenia,
yeah,
okay.
I did 3 movies with her.
Yep, she's very attractive.
Very.
Yep. Yeah, I know
she was going through all sorts of emotional problems back then. I hope she's over them now.
Yeah, and you had
She was having problems with boyfriends and stuff. So it was like making the movies was kind of a cathartic thing for her because she got away from them for a while.
yeah, and you had Kelly.
One of them came to the set once. I threw him out.
Oh, did you? Well, good thing. I love Nancy Allen, of course, I mentioned before. Kelly LeBrock, Sandal Bergman, Linda Blair. You've had in the movie. Shannon Tweed.
Yep. I worked with a lot of them, and they've all been quite beautiful and quite attractive and talented.
Oh, are you allowed to talk about why you didn't like Tanya Roberts and Jennifer Rubin?
She's a bitch. She's a bitch. Hate her guts.
Yeah, I seen her in Beastmaster. That's I remember her best.
Yeah, well, that's 100 years ago.
Yeah, Jennifer Rubin. That's the same woman from A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, right?
I wouldn't know.
Okay, I could have a mix up here, so my apologies if I got that wrong.
I wouldn't know.
What?
I never want to see her. I never want to see her again.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, what's up in the future for you?
What's up in the future is I'm doing a documentary about myself called Hollywood Horror Stories.
Okay.
And where I'm going to interview a lot of these girls and a lot of these guys that I worked with over the years, and they're going to tell funny stories, and it's going to be illustrated with clips from the movies.
We'll get to see lots of Kelly.
Well, you'll see Kelly in Chopping Mall, of course.
I love Kelly.
Have you seen Gila?
I did not see Gila. No.
What are you doing? What are you doing interviewing me? You should be watching Gila.
Actually, unless it's on the internet, I don't have television. I got my...
on Amazon.
Is it on Amazon? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll look that up.
I think it's Amazon Prime. You can watch it free.
Okay. I was not aware.
And she's in that a lot.
Well, I like that concept. I'll have to check that out.
Go watch Gila.
Yes.
She plays Wilma, the deputy sheriff.
That sounds perfect. Actually, it was Kelly where I reached out to you because I know when I interviewed her, you had done a lot of. She had done a lot of pictures for you. So, and of course, that branches off to me looking up other people, and it comes into a domino effect. So,
well, I'm glad that it worked out that way.
Absolutely.
Kelly's a doll, and I'm sure I'll be doing more stuff with her in the future.
Well, I'm certainly going to be...
she was supposed to be in one of my dog movies, but I think her car broke down or something like that, and I had to hire somebody else.
Oh, that's unfortunate. More Kelly is always good. She was a sweetheart to me.
Okay, good.
And I have to reach out to Barbara Crampton and get her on here because that will make 6 people from Chopping Mall. That just gives Chopping Mall a lot of exposure.
Well, I'm glad you're doing it. I'm glad you're doing it.
Yeah. Well, here's a question. You've done a few conventions. What's the most unique, interesting thing you've ever had to sign?
I hate conventions, Greg. I hate them. I just don't. I don't go most of the time because, I don't like charging for autographs.
Okay.
So and then everybody around me gets pissed because I'm signing for free and they're not.
I understand. Yeah.
And then, you get to meet fans, and that's a good thing. But I usually don't like concentrating myself where I'm sitting there from 10 in the morning till 7 at night, chatting people up.
I've heard some horror stories about people like William Shatner, like really.
Well, I try to. I appreciate my fans. I love my fans, but sitting, that's work. Sitting from 10 to 7, and without making any money, talking to people. I mean, I love doing it for an hour, but for 9 hours. It's long. So I don't go to conventions that often.
Okay. Well, hopefully soon I'll see Kelly at one because I know she does them.
She does them all the time.
I was just at my first one last November, and I was invited by one of my interview guests, and I had so much fun. I'm going back again this fall. So,
Well, yeah, for just a guy walking around, they're great.
Well, I had
someone sitting there, unless they're making money, it's not worth it.
Yeah, so, I see your point. Yeah,
I'd rather go to just have a go out to a bar and have a couple of drinks.
Well, you know what? I can relate to that too.
So, anyway, sir, I'm gonna, unless you have another, one last question, I'd like to.
Actually, I just want to ask you to do a plug for my show.
Hi, this is Jim Wynorski, director of Chopping Mall, and you're listening to Greg Gilbert on Python Radio out of New Brunswick,